Hi everybody, good to have you here. Welcome back to Yehusha's Glory. We're picking up at chapter 67, book of Jasher, page 432. There was a man in the land of Mitzrayim of the seed of Levi, whose name was Amram, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi, the son of Israel. And this man went and took a woman, namely Jochebed, the daughter of Levi, his father's sister, and she was 126 years old, and he came unto her. And the woman conceived and bore a daughter, and she called her name Miriam, because in those days the Mitzrayim had embittered the lives of the children of Israel. And she conceived again, and bore a son, and she called his name Aharon. For in the days of her conception, Pharaoh began to spill the blood of the male children of Israel. In those days died Sepho, the son of Eliphaz, son of Esau, king of Kittaim. And Jannius reigned in his stead. And the time that Sepho reigned over the children of Kittaim was 50 years, and he died and was buried in the city of Nabonah in the land of Kittaim. And Jannius, one of the mighty men of the children of Kittaim, reigned after him, and he reigned 50 years. And it was after the death of the king of Kittaim that Bilam, the son of Beor, fled from the land of Kittaim, and he went and came to Mitzrayim to the Pharaoh, king of Mitzrayim. And Pharaoh received him with great honor, for he had heard of his wisdom, and he gave him presents and made him for a counselor and aggrandized him. And Bilam dwelt in Mitzrayim in honor with all the nobles of the king, and the nobles exalted him because they all coveted to learn his wisdom. And in the 130th year of Israel's going down to Mitzrayim, Pharaoh dreamed that he was sitting upon his kingly throne, and lifted up his eyes and saw an old man standing before him. And there were scales in the hands of the old man, such scales as are used by merchants. And the old man took the scales and hung them before Pharaoh, and the old man took all the elders of Mitzrayim and all its nobles and great men, and he tied them together and put them in one scale. And he took a milk kid and put it in the other scale. And the kid preponderated over all. And Pharaoh was astonished at this dreadful vision, why the kid should preponderate over all. And Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. And Pharaoh rose up early in the morning, and called all his servants, and related to them the dream. And the men were greatly afraid. And the king said to all his wise men, Interpret, I pray you, the dream which I dreamed, that I may know it. And Bilam, the son of Beor, answered the king and said unto him, This means nothing else but a great evil that will spring up against Mitzrayim in the latter days. For a son will be born to Israel, who will destroy all Mitzrayim and its inhabitants, and bring forth Israel from Mitzrayim with a mighty hand. Now therefore, O king, take counsel upon this matter, that you may destroy the hope of the children of Israel and their expectation before this evil arise against Mitzrayim. And the king said unto Bilam, And what shall we do unto Israel? Surely after a certain manner did we at first counsel against them, and could not prevail over them. Now therefore give you also advice against them, by which we may prevail over them? And Bilam answered the king, saying, Send now, and call your two counselors, and we will see what their advice is upon this matter, and afterward your servant will speak. And the king sent and called his two counselors, Reuel, the Midianite, and Ayav, the Utsi, and they came and sat before the king. And the king said to them, Behold, you have both heard the dream which I have dreamed, and the interpretation thereof. Now Therefore give counsel and know and see what is to be done to the children of Israel, whereby we may prevail over them, before their evil shall spring up against us. And Reuel the Midiani answered the king and said, May the king live. May the king live forever. If it seem good to the king, let him desist from the Ivrim and leave them, and let him not stretch forth his hand against them. For these are they whom Yahuwah chose in days of old, and took as the lot of his inheritance from amongst all the nations of the earth and the kings of the earth. And who is there that stretched his hand against them with impunity, of whom their Elohim was not avenged? Surely you know that when Abraham went down to Mitzrayim, Pharaoh, the former king of Mitzrayim, saw Sarah his woman, and took her for a woman, because Abraham said, She is my sister. For he was afraid lest the men of Mitzrayim should slay him on account of his woman. And when the king of Mitzrayim had taken Sarah, then Elohim smote him and his household with heavy plagues, until he restored unto Abraham his woman Sarah. Then was he healed. And Abimelech the Gerari, king of the Palestine, Elohim punished on account of Sarah, woman of Abraham, in stopping up every womb from man to beast, when their Elohim came to Abimelech in the dream of night and terrified him, in order that he might restore to Abraham Sarah, whom he had taken. And afterward all the people of Gerar were punished on account of Sarah, and Abraham prayed to his Elohim for them, and he was entreated of them, and he healed them. And Abimelech feared all this evil that came upon him and his people, and he returned to Abraham his woman Sarah, and gave him with her many gifts. He did so also to Yitzhak, when he had driven him from Gerar, and Elohim had done wonderful things to him, that all the watercourses of Gerar were dried up, and their productive trees did not bring forth, until Abimelech of Gerar, and Achuzath, one of his friends, and Pichol, the captain of his host, went to him, and they bent and bowed down before him to the ground, and they requested him to supplicate for them. And he prayed to Yahuwah for them, and Yahuwah was entreated of them, and he healed them. Yaakov also, the plain man, was delivered through his integrity from the hand of his brother Esau, and the hand of Laban, the Aramite, his mother's brother, who had sought his life, likewise from the hand of all the kings of Canaan, who had come together against him and his children to destroy them. And Yahuwah delivered them out of their hands, that they turned upon them and smote them, for who had ever stretched forth his hand against them with impunity? Surely Pharaoh, the former, your father's father, raised Joseph, the son of Jacob, above all the princes of the land of Mitzrayim, when he saw his wisdom. For through his wisdom he rescued all the inhabitants of the land from the famine. After which he ordered Jacob and his children to come down to Mitzrayim, in order that through their virtue the land of Mitzrayim and the land of Goshen might be delivered from the famine. Now, therefore, if it seem good in your eyes, cease from destroying the children of Israel. But if it not be, if be not your will, but if it be not your will that they shall dwell in Mitzrayim, send them forth from here, that they may go to the land of Canaan, the land where their ancestors sojourned. And when Pharaoh heard the words of Jethro, he was very angry with him, so that he rose with shame from the king's presence, and went to Midian his land, and took Joseph's stick with him. And the king said to Ayav the Utsi, What say you, Ayav, and what is your advice respecting the Ivrim? So Ayav said to the king, Behold, all the inhabitants of the land are in your power. Let the king do as it seems good in his eyes. And the king said unto Bilam, What do you say, Bilam? Speak your words, that we may hear it. And Bilam said to the king, of all that the king has counseled against the Ivrim, will they be delivered, and the king will not be able to prevail over them with any counsel. For if you think to lessen them by the flaming fire, you cannot prevail over them. For surely their Elohim delivered Abraham, their father, from Ur of the Kasdim. And if you think to destroy them with a sword, surely Yitzhak their father was delivered from it, and the ram was placed in his stead. And if with hard and rigorous labor you think to lessen them, you will not prevail even in this, for their father Jacob served Laban in all manner of hard work and prospered. Now therefore, O king, hear my words, for this is the counsel which is counseled against them, by which you will prevail over them, and from which you should not depart. If it please the king, let him order all their children which shall be born from this day forward to be thrown into the water, for by this can you wipe away their name, for none of them, nor of their fathers, were tried in this manner. And the king heard the words of Bilam, and the thing pleased the king and the princes. And the king did according to the word of Bilam. And the king ordered a proclamation to be issued, and a law to be made throughout the land of Mitzrayim, saying, every male child born to the Ephraim from this day forward shall be thrown into the water. And Pharaoh called unto all his servants, saying, go now and seek throughout the land of Goshen, where the children of Israel are, and see that every son born to the Ivrim shall be cast into the river. But every daughter you shall yet live. You shall let live. And when the children of Israel heard this thing which Pharaoh had commanded, to cast their male children into the river, some of the people separated from their women, and others adhered to them. And from that day forward, when the time of delivery arrived to those women of Israel who had remained with their men, they went to the field to bring forth there. And they brought forth in the field, and left their children upon the field, and returned home. And Yahuwah, who had sworn to their ancestors to multiply them, sent one of his ministering angels, which are in heaven, to wash each child in water, to anoint and swathe it, and to put into its hands 2 smooth stones, from one of which it sucked milk, and from the other honey. And he caused its hair to grow to its knees, by which it might cover itself, to comfort it and to cleave to it through his compassion for it. And when Elohim had compassion over them, and had desired to multiply them upon the face of the land, he ordered his earth to receive them, to be preserved therein, till the time of their growing up, after which the earth opened its mouth, and vomited them forth, and they sprouted forth from the city like the herb of the earth, and the grass of the forest, and they returned each to his family, and to his father's house, and they remained with them. And the babes of the children of Israel were upon the earth like the herb of the field, through Elohim's grace to them. And when all the Mitzrayim saw this thing, they went forth each to his field with his yoke of oxen and his plowshare, and they plowed it up as one plows the earth at seed time. And when they plowed, they were unable to hurt the infants of the children of Israel. So the people increased and waxed exceedingly. And Pharaoh ordered his officers daily to go to Goshen to seek for the babes of the children of Israel. And when they had sought and found one, they took it from its mother's bosom by force and threw it into the river. but the female child they left with its mother. Thus did the Mitzrayim do to Israel all the days. Moshe, a child of promise, is born. The Mitzrayim women acting as spies, Moshe is delivered and placed by his mother in an ark of bulrushes, is found and adopted by the daughter of Pharaoh, and grows up among the king's children. Chapter 68, page 434 in Jasher. And it was at that time the Ruach Elohim was upon Miriam, the daughter of Amram, the sister of Aaron. And she went forth and prophesied about the house, saying, Behold, a son will be born unto us from my father and mother this time, and he will save Israel from the hands of Mitzrayim. And when Amram heard the words of his daughter, he went and took his woman back to the house, after he had driven her away, at the time when Pharaoh ordered every male child of the house of Jacob to be thrown into the water. So Amram took Jochebed, his woman, 3 years after he had driven her away, and he came to her, and she conceived. And at the end of 7 months from her conception, she brought forth a son, and the whole house was filled with great light, as the light of the sun and moon at the time of their shining. And when the woman saw the child, that it was good and pleasing to the sight, she hid it for 3 months in an inner room. In those days the Mitzrayim conspired to destroy all the Ivrim there. And the Mitzrayim women went to Goshen, where the children of Israel were, and they carried their young ones upon their shoulders, their babes who could not yet speak. And in those days, when the women of the children of Israel brought forth, each woman had hidden her son from before the Mitzrayim, that the Mitzrayim might not know of their bringing forth, and might not destroy them from the land. And the Mitzrayim women came to Goshen, and their children who could not speak were upon their shoulders. And when a Mitzrayim woman came into the house of an Ivri woman, her babe began to cry. And when it cried, the child that was in the inner room answered it. So the Mitzrayim woman went and told it at the house of Pharaoh. And the Pharaoh sent his officers to take the children and slay them. Thus did the Mitzrayim to the Ivri women all those days. And it was at that time, about 3 months from Jochebed's concealment of her son, that the thing was known in Pharaoh's house. And the woman hastened to take away her son before the officers came. And she took for him an ark of bulrushes, and daubed it with slime and with pitch, and put the child therein. And she laid in it the flags by the river's brink. And his sister Miriam stood afar off to know what would be done to him, and what would become of her words. And Elohim sent forth at that time a terrible heat in the land of Mitzrayim, which burned up the flesh of man like the sun in his circuit, and it greatly oppressed the Mitzrayim. And all the Mitzrayim went down to bathe in the river on account of the consuming heat which burned up their flesh. And Bathia, the daughter of the Pharaoh, went also to bathe in the river, owing to the consuming heat, and her maidens walked at the riverside, and all the women of Mitzrayim as well. And Bathia lifted up her eyes to the river, and she saw the ark upon the water, and sent her maid to fetch it. And she opened it, and saw the child, and behold, the babe wept, and she had compassion on him. And she said, This is one of the Ivri children. And all the women of Mitzrayim walking on the riverside, desired to give him suck. But he would not suck, for this thing was from Yahuwah, in order to restore him to his mother's breast. And Miriam, his sister, was at that time amongst the Mitzrayim women at the riverside, and she saw this thing, and she said to Pharaoh's daughter, Shall I go and fetch a nurse of the Ivri women, that she may nurse the child for you? And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, Go. And the young woman went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said to Jochebed, "Take this child away and suckle it for me, and I will pay you your wages, 2 bits of silver daily." And the woman took the child and nursed it. And at the end of 2 years, when the child grew up, she brought him to the daughter of Pharaoh, and he was unto her as a son. And she called his name Moshe. For she said, "Because I drew him out of the water." And Amram, his father, called his name Chabar, for he said, "It was for him that he associated with his woman, whom he had turned away." And Jochebed, his mother, called his name Yekuthiel, because she said, "I have hoped for him to El Shaddai, and Elohim restored him unto me." And Miriam, his sister, called him Yered, for she descended after him to the river to know what his end would be. And Aaron, his brother, called his name Avizonok, saying, "My father left my mother and returned to her on his account." And Kohath, the father of Amram, called his name Abigdor, because on his account did Elohim repair the breach of the house of Jacob, that they could no longer throw their male children into the water. And the nurse called him Avisokah, saying, "In his tabernacle was he hidden for 3 months on account of the children of Cham." And all Israel called his name Shemayahu, son of Nathaniel, for they said, "In his days has Elohim heard their cries and rescued them from their oppressors." And Moshe was in Pharaoh's house, and was unto Bathia, Pharaoh's daughter, as a son. And Moshe grew up amongst the king's children. Pharaoh proclaims that if any of Israel are short in their labor, either in bricks or mortar, his youngest son shall be put in their place. Chapter 69. And the king of Edom died in those days, in the 18th year of his reign, and he was buried in the temple, which he had built for himself as his royal residence in the land of Edom. And the children of Esau sent to Pethor, which is upon the river, and they fetched from there a young man of beautiful eyes and comely aspect, whose name was Shaul. And they made him king over them in the place of Samlah. And Shaul reigned over all the children of Esau in the land of Edom for 40 years. And when Pharaoh, king of Mitzrayim, saw the counsel which Balaam had advised respecting the children of Israel did not succeed, but that still they were fruitful, multiplied, and increased throughout the land of Mitzrayim, then Pharaoh commanded in those days that a proclamation should be issued throughout Mitzrayim to the children of Israel, saying, "No man shall diminish anything of his daily labor. And the man who shall be found deficient in his labor, which he performs daily, whether in mortar or in bricks, then his youngest son shall be put in their place." And the labor of Mitzrayim strengthened upon the children of Mitzrayim, Israel, bumped into the table there, I apologize. Upon the children of Israel in those days. And behold, if one brick was deficient in any man's labor, the Mitzrayim took his youngest boy by force from his mother and put him into the building in the place of the brick which his father had left wanting. And the men of Mitzrayim did so to all the children of Israel day by day, all the days for a long period. But the tribe of Levi did not at that time work with Israel their brethren from the beginning, for the children of Levi knew the cunning of the Mitzrayim which they exercised at first toward Israel. Now, I don't normally do this, but I'm going to back up and reread something because I need to read it for myself. It says, "The labor of the Mitzrayim strengthened over the children of Israel in those days, and behold, if one brick was deficient in any man's labor, daily labor, the Mitzrayim took his youngest boy by force from his mother and put him into the building in the place of the brick which his father had left wanting. So if you put a bad brick in the building, your youngest son became a brick, is what it's saying. I normally don't do that. I thought that's what I just read. So the men of the Mitzrayim did so to all the children of Israel day by day, all the days for a long period. Okay, here we go. Moshe puts the king's crown upon his own head. Balaam and the wise men make this a pretext against him. When grown up, Moshe visits his brethren and learns of their grievances. Moshe obtains a day's rest on the Shabbat for all Yisrael. Okay, here we go, chapter 70. And in the 3rd year from the birth of Moshe, Pharaoh was sitting at a banquet, when Alparanith, the queen, was sitting at his right, and Bathia at his left, and the lad Moshe was lying upon her bosom. And Balaam, the son of Beor, with his 2 sons and all the princes of the kingdom, were sitting at table in the king's presence, and the lad stretched forth his hand upon the king's head, and took the crown from the king's head, and placed it on his own head. And when the king and princes saw the work which the boy had done, the king and princes were terrified. And one man to his neighbor expressed astonishment. And the king said unto the princes who were before him at the table, What speak you, and what say you, O ye princes, in this matter? And what is to be the judgment against the boy on account of this act? And Balaam, the son of Beor, the magician, answered before the king and princes, and he said, Remember now, O my lord and king, the dream which you did dream many days since, and that which your servant interpreted unto you. Now, therefore, this is a child from the ivory children, in whom is the Ruach Elohim. And let not my lord the king imagine that this youngster did this thing without knowledge, for he is an ivory boy, and wisdom and understanding are with him. Although he is yet a child, and with wisdom he has done this, and chosen unto himself the kingdom of Mitzrayim. For this is the manner of all the Ivorim, to deceive kings and their nobles, to do all these things cunningly, in order to make the kings of the earth and their men tremble. Surely you know that Abraham their father acted thus, who deceived the army of Nimrod, king of Babel, and of Abimelech, king of Gerar, and that he possessed himself of the land of the children of Cheth, and all the kingdoms of Canaan, and that he descended into Mitzrayim, and said of Sarah his woman, She is my sister, in order to mislead Mitzrayim and her king. His son Isaac also did so when he went to Gerar and dwelt there, and his strength prevailed over the army of Abimelech, king of the Palestine. He also thought of making the kingdom of Palestine stumble in saying that Rivkah, his woman, was his sister. Jacob also dealt treacherously with his brother and took from his hand his birthright and his blessing. He went then to Padan Aram, to the house of Laban, his mother's brother, and cunningly obtained from him his daughter, his cattle, and all belonging to him, and fled away and returned to the land of Canaan to his father. His sons sold their brother Joseph, who went down into Mitzrayim and became a slave, and was placed in the prison house for 12 years, until the former Pharaoh dreamed dreams, and withdrew him from the prison house, and magnified him above all the princes in Mitzrayim on account of his interpreting his dreams to him. And when Elohim caused a famine throughout the land, he sent for and brought his father and all his brothers and the whole of his father's household, and supported them without price or reward, and bought the Mitzrayim for slaves. Now therefore, my lord king, behold, this child has risen up in their stead in Mitzrayim to do according to their deeds, and to trifle with every king, prince, and judge. If it please the king, let us now spill his blood upon the ground, lest he grow up and take away the government from your hand, and the hope of Mitzrayim perish after he shall have reigned. And Bilam said to the king, Let us moreover call for all the judges of Mitzrayim and the wise men thereof, and let us know if the judgment of death is due to this boy, as you did say, and then we will slay him. And Pharaoh sent and called for all the wise men of Mitzrayim, and they came before the king, and an angel of Yehusha came amongst them. And he was like one of the wise men of Mitzrayim. And the king said to the wise men, Surely you have heard what this ivory boy who is in the house has done, and thus has Bilam judged in the matter. Now judge you also, and see what is due to the boy for the act he has committed. And the angel, who seemed like one of the wise men of Pharaoh, answered and said as follows, Before all the wise men of Mitzrayim, and before the king and the princes, if it please the king, let the king send for men, who shall bring before him an onyx stone and a coal of fire, and place them before the child. And if the child shall stretch forth his hand and take the onyx stone, then shall we know that with wisdom has the youth done all that he has done, and we must slay him. But if he stretch forth his hand upon the coal, then shall we know that it was not with knowledge that he did this thing, and he shall live. And the thing seemed good in the eyes of the king and the princes. So the king did according to the word of the angel of Yehusha. And the king ordered the onyx stone and coal to be brought and placed before Moshe. And they placed the boy before them, and the lad endeavored to stretch forth his hand to the onyx stone. But the angel of Yehusha took his hand and placed it upon the coal. And the coal became extinguished in his hand, and he lifted it up and put it into his mouth and burned part of his lips and part of his tongue, and he became heavy in mouth and tongue. And when the king and princes saw this, they knew that Moshe had not acted with wisdom in taking off the crown from the king's head. So the king and princes refrained from slaying the child. So Moshe remained in Pharaoh's house, growing up, and Yehusha was with him. And while the boy was in the king's house, he was robed in purple, and he grew amongst the children of the king. And when Moshe grew up in the king's house, Bathia, the daughter of Pharaoh, considered him as a son. And all the household of Pharaoh honored him, and all the men of Mitzrayim were afraid of him. And he daily went forth and came into the land of Goshen, where his brethren and the children of Israel were. And Moshe saw them daily in shortness of breath and hard labor. And Moshe asked them, saying, Wherefore is this labor meted out unto you day by day? And they told him all that had befallen them, and all the injunctions which Pharaoh had put upon them before his birth. And they told him all the counsels which Bilam the son of Beor had counseled against them, and what he had also counseled against him in order to slay him when he had taken the king's crown off his head. And when Moshe heard these things, his anger was kindled against Bilam, and he sought to kill him, and he was in ambush for him day by day. And Bilam was afraid of Moshe, and he and his 2 sons rose up and went forth from Mitzrayim, and they fled and delivered their souls, and betook themselves to the land of Cush, to Kikianus, the king of Cush. And Moshe was in the king's house, going out and coming in. Yehusha gave him favor in the eyes of Pharaoh, and in the eyes of all his servants, and in the eyes of all the people of Mitzrayim. And they loved Moshe exceedingly. And the day arrived when Moshe went to Goshen to see his brethren, and he saw the children of Israel in their burdens and hard labor, and Moshe was grieved on their account. And Moshe returned to Mitzrayim, and came to the house of Pharaoh, and came before the king, and Moshe bowed down before the king. And Moshe said unto Pharaoh, I pray you, my lord, I have come to seek a small request from you. Turn not away my face empty. And Pharaoh said unto him, Speak. And Moshe said unto Pharaoh, Let there be given unto your servants, the children of Israel, who are in Goshen, 1 day, to rest therein from their labor. And the king answered Moshe and said, Behold, I have lifted up your face in this thing to grant your request. And Pharaoh ordered a proclamation to be issued throughout Mitzrayim and Goshen, saying, To you, all the children of Israel, thus says the king, For 6 days you shall do your work and labor, but on the 7th day you shall rest, and shall not perform any work. Thus shall you do all the days, as the king and Moshe the son of Bathiah have commanded. And Moshe rejoiced at this thing which the king had granted to him. And all the children of Israel did as Moshe ordered them. For this thing was from Yahuwah to the children of Israel, for Yahuwah had begun to remember the children of Israel, to save them for the sake of their fathers. And Yahuwah was with Moshe, and his fame went throughout Mitzrayim. And Moshe became great in the eyes of all the Mitzrayim, and in the eyes of all the children of Israel, seeking good for his people Israel, and speaking words of peace regarding them to the king. And Moshe slays a Mitzrayim, being discovered, flees from Mitzrayim. Aaron prophesies. Okay, now chapter 71. And when Moshe was 18 years old, he desired to see his father and mother, and he went to them in Goshen, And when Moshe had come near Goshen, he came to the place where the children of Israel were engaged in work, and he observed their burdens, and he saw a Mitzrayim smiting one of his ivory brethren. And when the man who was beaten saw Moshe, he ran to him for help, but the man Moshe was greatly respected in the house of Pharaoh. And he said to him, My lord, attend to me. This Mitzrayim came to my house in the night, bound me, and came to my woman in my presence. And now he seeks to take my life away. And when Moshe heard this wicked thing, his anger was kindled against the Mitzrayim, and he turned this way and the other. And when he saw there was no man there, he smote the Mitzrayim and hid him in the sand, and delivered the ivory from the hand of him that smote him. And the ivory went to his house, and Moshe returned to his home, and went forth and came back to the king's house. And when the man had returned home, he thought of repudiating his woman, for it was not right in the house of Yaakov for any man to come to his woman after she had been defiled. And the woman went and told her brothers, and the woman's brothers sought to slay him, and he fled to his house and escaped. And on the 2nd day, Moshe went forth to his brethren, and saw, and behold, 2 men were quarreling. And he said to the wicked one, Why do you smite your neighbor? And he answered him and said to him, Who has set you for a prince and judge over us? Do you think to slay me as you did slay the Mitzri? And Moshe was afraid, and he said, Surely the thing is known. And Pharaoh heard of this affair, and he ordered Moshe to be slain. So Elohim sent his angel, and he appeared unto Pharaoh in the likeness of a captain of the guard. And the angel of Yahuwah took the sword from the hand of the captain of the guard, and took his head off with it. For the likeness of the captain of the guard was turned into the likeness of Moshe. And the angel of Yahuwah took hold of the right hand of Moshe, and brought him forth from Mitzrayim, and placed him from without the borders of Mitzrayim, a distance of 40 days' journey. And Aaron, his brother, alone remained in the land of Mitzrayim, and he prophesied to the children of Israel, saying, Thus says Yahuwah Elohim of your ancestors, Throw away each man the abominations of his eyes, and do not defile yourselves with the idols of Mitzrayim. And the children of Israel rebelled, and would not hearken to Aaron at that time. And Yahuwah thought to destroy them, were it not that Yahuwah remembered the covenant which he had made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. In those days the land of Pharaoh continued to be severe against the children of Israel, and he crushed and oppressed them until the time when Elohim sent forth his word and took notice of them. Now Moshe flees to Cush. At the death of the king he is chosen in his stead. He reigns 40 years in Cush. Chapter 72. And it was in those days that there was a great war between the children of Cush and the children of the east and Aram, and they rebelled against the king of Cush, in whose hands they were. So Kikianus, king of Cush, went forth with all the children of Cush, a people numerous as the sand, and he went to fight against Aram and the children of the east, to bring them under subjection. And when Kikianus went out, he left Bilam the magician with his 2 sons to guard the city, and the lowest sort of the people of the land. So Kikianus went forth to Aram and the children of the east, and he fought against them and smote them, and they all fell down wounded before Kikianus and his people. And he took many of them captives, and he brought them under subjection as at first, and he encamped upon their land to take tribute from them as usual. And Bilam the son of Beor, when the king of Cush had left him to guard the city and the poor of the city, he rose up and advised with the people of the land to rebel against King Kikianus, not to let him enter the city when he should come home. And the people of the land hearkened to him, and they swore to him and made him king over them, and his 2 sons for captains of the army. So they rose up and raised the walls of the city at the 2 corners. They built an exceeding strong building, and at the 3rd corner they dug ditches without number between the city and the river, which surrounded the whole land of Cush, and they made the waters of the river burst forth there. At the 4th corner they collected numerous serpents by their incantations and enchantments, and they fortified the city and dwelt therein, and no one went out or in before them. And Kikianus fought against Aram and the children of the east, and he subdued them as before, and they gave him their usual tribute, and he went and returned to his land. When Kikianus, the king of Cush, approached his city and all the captains of the forces with him, they lifted up their eyes and saw that the walls of the city were built up and greatly elevated. So the men were astonished at this, and they said one to the other, "It is because they saw that we were delayed in battle and were greatly afraid of us. Therefore they have done this thing and raised the city walls and fortified them, so that the kings of Canaan might not come in battle against them." So the king and the troops approached the city door, and they looked up, and behold, all the gates of the city were closed. And they called out to the sentinels, saying, "Open unto us, that we may enter the city." But the sentinels refused to open to them by the order of Bilam, the magician, their king. They suffered them not to enter their city, so they raised a battle with them opposite the city gate, and 130 men of the army of Kikianus fell on that day. And on the next day they continued to fight, and they fought at the side of the river. They endeavored to pass, but were not able. So some of them sank in the pits and died. So the king ordered them to cut down trees to make rafts upon which they might pass to them, and they did so. And when they came to the place of the ditches, the waters revolved by mills, and 200 men upon 10 rafts were drowned. And on the 3rd day they came to fight at the side where the serpents were, but they could not approach there, for the serpents slew of them 170 men, and they ceased fighting against Cush, and they besieged Cush for 9 years. No person came out or in. At that time that the war and the siege were against Cush, Moshe fled from Mitzrayim, from Pharaoh, who sought to kill him for having slain the Mitzrayim. And Moshe was 18 years old when he fled from Mitzrayim, from the presence of Pharaoh, and he fled and escaped to the camp of Kikianus, which at that time was besieging Cush. And Moshe was 9 years in the camp of Kikianus, king of Cush, all the time that they were besieging Cush, and Moshe went out and came in with them. And the king and princes and all the fighting men loved Moshe, for he was great and worthy. His stature was like a noble lion. His face was like the sun, his strength was like that of a lion, and he was counselor to the king. And at the end of 9 years, Kikianus was seized with a mortal disease, and his illness prevailed over him, and he died on the 7th day. So his servants embalmed him, and carried him, and buried him opposite the city gate to the north of the land of Mitzrayim, and they built over him an elegant, strong, and high building, and they placed great stones below. And the king's scribes engraved upon those stones all the might of their king Kikianus, and all his battles which he had fought. Behold, They are written there at this day. Now after the death of Kikianus, king of Cush, it grieved his men and troops greatly on account of the war. So they said to one another, "Give us counsel what we are to do at this time. As we have resided in the wilderness 9 years away from our homes. If we say we will fight against the city, many of us will fall, wounded or killed. And if we remain here in the siege, we shall also die, for now all the kings of Aram and the children of the east will hear that our king is dead, and they will attack us suddenly in a hostile manner, and they will fight against us and leave no remnant of us. Now therefore let us go and make a king over us, and let us remain in the siege until the city is delivered up to us." And they wished to choose on that day a man for king from the army of Kikianus, and they found no object of their choice like Moshe to reign over them. And they hastened and stripped off each man his garments and cast them upon the ground. And they made a great heap and placed Moshe thereon. And they rose up and blew with trumpets and called out before him and said, "May the king live, may the king live." And all the people and nobles swore unto him to give him for a woman Adoniah, the queen, the Cushi, woman of Kikianus. And they made Moshe king over them on that day. And all the people of Cush issued a proclamation on that day, saying, "Every man must give something to Moshe of what is in his possession." And they spread out a sheet upon the heap, and every man cast into it something of what he had. One a gold earring, and the other a coin, also of onyx stones, bdellium, pearls, and marble did the children of Cush cast unto Moshe upon the heap. Also silver and gold in great abundance. And Moshe took all the silver and gold, all the vessels, and the bdellium and onyx stones, which all the children of Cush had given to him, and he placed them amongst his treasures. And Moshe reigned over the children of Cush on that day in the place of Kikianus, king of Cush. And when we come back, it'll be the reign of Moshe and his strategic warfare. We're going to stop right now. Father bless every one of you guys, I'll tell you, and women. We're having a great time here. I sure appreciate having you with me. I love doing this with you. If you have any questions or concerns or anything like that, leave a comment. I love to hear from you. I appreciate all the blessings. Also, we have that P.O. box if you want to send anything along. Father, watch out for us. We need you. We are all reading this together. We hope we please you. Give us the truth. We appreciate all the truth that you're giving us. We pray to you in Yehusha's name. Hey, I love you a bunch. Father loves you. I'll talk to you later. This is Yehusha's Glory.